Hey guys and ladies, just wanted to check in with another short video today talking a little bit about how protectionists actually carry out the theory of protectionism. At this point, hopefully you guys have had a chance to look at some of the other videos. Hopefully you've had a chance to see what protectionism is, what are some of the arguments in favor of protectionism. But now the question kind of becomes, all right, we get why protectionists try to only trade in very specific situations. How do they go about doing that? What are the tools that they sort of use to make sure that they're only trading in situations that are beneficial? With free trade, we don't really have to get into much of a how. The only how is, hey, we're just going to trade with who we want. That's pretty much it, the free trade. So there's not really anything specific as far as tools or anything. They just trade with whoever they want. But over on the protectionism end, there are a couple of specific tools that protectionist governments will use in order to make sure that they're getting the best deal or to basically keep trade with certain nations out of reach. So the first thing and the most common one that we see, and this has been in the news a whole lot over the last 3 or 4 years, is tariffs. Okay, we definitely see a lot of tariffs, okay? A tariff, as you probably already know, is just a tax on an import. So anytime, if we had tariffs on, let's say, cars, okay, anytime we would get a Toyota, a BMW, any sort of car from overseas, we would put a tax on that car, essentially. So when the other country is trying to sell those products here in the United States, we're making those goods more expensive. Now the question would be, all right, why are we trying to do that? Well, if we can make foreign goods more expensive, then that makes it less likely that people are going to buy those goods. And what type of goods are they going to buy instead? The domestic goods. They're going to buy the relatively cheaper Fords, Chevys, GMCs, the old days Saturns or Plymouths or whatever car you want to go with there. But they're going to buy American if those American cars are cheaper in certain instances. So that's one way that we can use, that a protectionist country could use a tool, would be tariffs. Another one that we see reasonably frequently is quotas. Now, a quota is just like it sounds. It's essentially a set maximum number of goods that can come into a nation. So let's say that we were trying to protect the dairy farmers. We're trying to protect all the people up in Wisconsin that have dairy farms. So what could we do? We could say, all right, we're going to put quotas on the number of basically the number of pounds, thousands of pounds, or the number of tons of cheese that could be imported into the U.S. We're only going to allow 15,000 pounds of cheese to come into the U.S. from these different nations. That would be sort of putting a cap on how many imports can come in. That could basically mean that there's a much smaller supply of those imports. Most of what we're going to buy then here domestically would be domestic goods, domestic cheese. Now, take a second. I'm going to pause for a second. I know it's going to be awkward, one of those like Dora the Explorer moments where there's this super long pause here. But I want you to think for just a second, which of these two would economists probably recommend if you were going to do one or the other? Okay, which one do you think economists would probably recommend? Okay, ready? Was that super awkward? All right, so basically it's going to be tariffs. The reason being that they're going to recommend tariffs is because that also generates government revenue. A tax always is generating some form of government revenue, where a quota does not. Now, what some countries like to do, they get a little slick, is they try to combine them. They'll put a quota on the number of pounds of cheese or whatever the product is. They'll put a quota on there, but then in order to get your goods imported into the United States, okay, in order for us to be part of that, or a certain country's goods to be part of that, what they'll do is they'll sell a permit. So the quotas will sometimes come with permits, and those permits are sold. So that's a way of sort of combining the two, where you get the government revenue that you would have with a tariff by selling permits as part of the quota, but you still put a cap a maximum on what the quantity is that can be imported into the U.S. or whatever country it is that you're looking at. Okay, the third thing that we're going to look at real quick that's a tool of protectionism is actually illegal. But that doesn't mean it doesn't still go on in countries such as Russia. So some nations like that, we still see this. And that's exchange controls. Now, we haven't really talked too much yet about exchange rates or exchanging currency. We're going to get there, believe it or not. That's pretty much the last thing we're going to talk about. We're actually almost to that point. But essentially what this is, what exchange control is it's putting a quota on not a product, the amount of product that can come in, but the amount of currency, of a foreign currency that can be exchanged within the borders of a country. Now, there's a number of reasons why a country might do that illegally, but still. There's a number of reasons why they might do that. Here, the concept is if we're keeping other currencies out, we're forcing trade to be done in only our currency. We're forcing things to be done on our terms. Now, again, it is illegal. It does still go on in less scrupulous nations, let's say. Not as frequently as it used to, but it still goes on. And so I did want to at least mention that one. And then the last one, and this is one that we see actually quite a bit, is export subsidies. Export subsidies. Now, an export subsidy is basically when we are wanting to export a certain good. If the government, our government, subsidizes that good, our government gives companies that make that particular good a certain amount of money, what that does is it lowers the cost of our good. That means the company themselves can afford to now make the price of their good cheaper, which makes it more likely that they can sell it in other places. So you may say, well, wait, this sounds like it's encouraging trade. Yeah, it is, but only in the circumstance where we have the comparative advantage. So it kind of goes back to protectionism is not anti-trade, it's trade only when it benefits us to the max. And this would be an example of that. So if you're talking self-driving cars, this would be an example if Google, I think Google is going to probably be the first one or be the leader in the clubhouse with self-driving cars. I don't know that, but that's my best guess. So if that's the case, if Google comes out with the best mass-produced self-driving car software, let's say, if the government gave Google subsidies, they gave them money to essentially lower their cost, and then we were able to more effectively trade with other countries. Other countries were buying the Google self-driving software. That would mean more exports and greater net exports and greater aggregate demand and greater real GDP for the United States. Now, here's the downside with this, okay? The main negative when it comes to export subsidies is what sounds kind of weird, but I use the toothpaste analogy, which is simply this. You can't get the toothpaste back in the tube. Some of you guys may have had that before where you squeeze the toothpaste a little too hard, too much comes out, and you go, oh, and try to get back in. You can't get it back in the tube, right? The same kind of thing here. Once you start subsidizing an industry, it's really, really difficult to take those subsidies away. I may have mentioned this before, but it's one of the reasons why in Iowa, where it's a major farm country and all of that, why there's still no subsidies that have been taken away going back to World War II. It's not just Iowa. Illinois is another one. A lot of states rather. In the Midwest, you have farm states where we're still subsidizing people based on World War II situations or concepts of economics. But the reason that we're still doing that is the farm lobby is not about to give up those subsidies, number one. And then number two, they don't want a situation where politicians are not going to go into Iowa, which is the first state for a primary every 4 years. They're not going to go in there and say, yep, Iowa, we're going to go ahead and cut all your subsidies. There's no one that's going to vote for a candidate. It's basically political suicide if you go in there and do that. So this is the concept. Again, you can't get the toothpaste back in the tube if you use these export subsidies. but they're still pretty popular because they do give us a comparative advantage. So I'm going to leave off right there for right now. I'll have another short video probably up tomorrow along with an assignment there. Hope you guys are doing well. Don't forget, office hours are this week as well. I'll post those on Google Classroom again. Again, love y'all, miss y'all. We'll see you soon.